Hello, my dear viewers. This amazing story will be very instructive for you. It is very interesting and beautiful. I wish you enjoy watching it. That doesn't happen. Either he preferred to go to work and back by public transport. There is time to think about something of your own and read a book and pay on the internet. The car doesn't give you that luxury. There you always have to be extremely careful. Monitor the situation on the road. Even standing in a dense, multi-kilometer traffic jam, he could not afford to be distracted even for a minute. Not much can happen at this time. And he runs a high-risk vehicle. So always be on the lookout. In this case, the question banal responsibility and decency. Today, either he would prefer to go by car, paying all his attention to the road because the thoughts in his head were spinning unhappy. And even the book did not help to distract from them. Turning page after page, he found himself not grasping the meaning of what was written at all. "What is it?" Collins strictly asked the head of the surgical department of the city hospital. "Why did you prescribe this drug to the patient?" "Yes, because it is cheap, but it works no worse than foreign analogs." "That's exactly what's cheap. All sorts of old women will buy it anyway. And we have an agreement with a network of pharmacies that we must recommend very specific medicines, and the number of sales directly affects your premium too." "If you suddenly forgot, but yours is still more," Talia muttered. "I won't prescribe a medicine according to the bull, the cost of which is half of her pension, when there are cheaper but equally high-quality analogs. That's why you still go to a simple surgeon. And I'm your boss. This means, among other things, that you are obliged to follow my orders. I don't remember that deception of the population was part of my official duties. And anyway, my shift for half an hour is ended, so I guess I'll go home." With that, the young man turned and walked towards the door. The manager could only silently look after him. He understood that there was absolutely nothing to dismiss the obstinate doctor, as much as he didn't want to. He did his job well, so it was not possible to find a formal reason. And the recommendations of the wrong drugs are still really insufficient. Noah, in turn, understood that he didn't have much to change work for. Everywhere, the situation is approximately the same, although in large cities it may be different. But he didn't want to find out. He studied for so long in order to help people save, and in large cities, even without him, there are enough good doctors. Not like in small provincial towns like the one in which he was born and lived almost all his life. True, get an education. The guy went to the capital, and he didn't like it at all. Everyone is making noise, fussing, running somewhere. He didn't like this kind of life. And this made him even more cleaned up in his decision to return to his hometown after graduation in order to benefit its residents. The Thule family was very proud of their son's choice. Almost all of them were also doctors and dedicated their lives to helping ordinary people in small towns. So the young man also followed in the footsteps of his ancestors. Leon, who should now be called Alex, had a slightly different motivation for returning to his hometown. They were classmates and, as it turned out, countrymen. True, the current head of graduation from studies was not as good as we would like. But he knew how, in his own words, to negotiate with people, as a rule, with the help of money, threats, or connections. It is clear that in the capital he would have had much fewer opportunities than in his hometown. And when he returned here, he almost immediately managed to achieve the position of head. In what ways Noah preferred not to be interested? At that time, he was just doing his job, saving lives. And all these undercover games did not interest him at all. That was until they touched him directly. It all started with the same statement to Leon that now they must prescribe strictly certain drugs to patients, those for which pharmacies will pay them a higher percentage. The requirement itself was not much of a problem. Noah simply ignored him, knowing full well that the law was on his side. But in connection with this situation, another very unpleasant thing happened. Indignation is seething. Then, still quite a young man, yesterday's student, He came home and expressed his indignation to his wife in the hope of understanding and support, prescribing expensive medicines to people who can barely earn enough money to eat, and some of them don't work at all. The pensioners. Can you imagine Eve, what he thinks about? He's still a doctor, but behaves like a business person. Cold, interrupted his wife. As a person who does not want to be among those whose salary is barely enough for food. So you think he made the right decision? Dazed Noah. I always told you that you lack business acumen. We live like beggars, honestly. But you could also be the head of the department. And if it wasn't for your pathological honesty, what's the point of helping people when your own wife can't afford an extra pair of boots? This accusation was only partly true. Of course, they did not live well, but it was quite enough to cover basic needs, including clothes and shoes. Not from bronze boutiques, of course, but it's not second-hand. They even had a car, albeit not the latest model, but quite fulfilling its functions. In addition, a clear conscience is also worth something. At least that's what Noah thought. But apparently not his wife. Of course, they had conflicts before, regarding the fact that the guy, in her opinion, was earning too little. But, as a rule, they slept pretty quickly and did not lead to any serious consequences. But not at this time. For Noah, it was an unpleasant discovery that his wife reacted so calmly to outright bribery. Eva, in turn, realized that he really did not have at all the quality that she diplomatically called business sense. And there is hardly a chance that she will be able to convince her husband of the correctness of her approach to life. Calmly discussing all these details, the couple came to the conclusion that they would be better off without each other and divorced by mutual consent. Everything would be fine. But literally a week later, Eva was already preparing for the wedding with Leon, which of course the whole city quickly learned about. Noah suspected that their relationship began long before the divorce. So the guy was in a situation when his old rival at the institute received a promotion and became the boss, and even took his wife away from him. In addition, she demanded things from him that she would never have done in her life. This was, of course, very disappointing. And here is another conflict all on the same ground. He pulled the young doctor out of his thoughts. A strange picture outside the window. The bus just drove to the embankment, and Eva noticed the grandfather of the beginner in the sea. His first thought was that it was an ordinary walrus. Person goes in for sports, strengthens the immune system. Okay, he was about to turn away from a window when he noticed that something was wrong here. Grandfather convulsively emerges from the water. Grandfather convulsively emerges from the water, gasping for air, and then disappeared from view again. His hand movements were erratic and useless. He did not try to grab onto the ice or do anything that would help him get out. Rather the opposite. He only improved his position as a doctor. Either I immediately realized that my grandfather was drowning. The bus had just pulled up to the stop. The guy quickly jumped out of it and rushed to the sea, pulled out his grandfather. Examined him. This is true. Failure of the heart. Stopping breathing. Resuscitation only performed almost automatically, and after a few long minutes, turned out to be an eternity. The victim began to breathe. Then he took care to rub it with a towel, which grandfather prudently took with him. He helped him get dressed, draping his own jacket over his shoulders. The rescued man preferred not to look at him and seemed extremely embarrassed. What was wrong here? Grandfather, this is the first time you contradict, right? Not used to this. Don't know how to behave, what to do if things get bad. So why go there? Life is tired. Grandpa was silent for a while, and then for the first time he looked directly at his savior. Maybe tired, he grumbled. But that's not the point. I didn't dive there of my own free will. I can't do without it. It sounded as strange as possible. Noah, however, saw that grandfather might and would like to tell someone the details of his act and the situation in which he found himself. Only now He did not know if he could trust the guy who saved him. "What is your name, then?" though he inquired first, remembering finally Liam's politeness. "And I'm Noah. Very nice." "That's it, Liam. Let's have a cup of tea with you." "Would you like something warm right now?" "I'm telling you this as a doctor." "There is a shopping center right next to it. There's a vending machine, coffee tables to sit on." "Well, let's go," he agreed. On the way, Noah managed to get a good look at his companion. He wasn't quite as old as the guy thought. At first glance, apparently, he was about the same age as this or that late father. In addition, the man had a quite strong, even athletic physique, not too characteristic of people of his age. When they got to the mall, they took tea from the machine and sat down at a table together. For a while, both were silent. Maybe he didn't want to rush Liam, but still the desire to understand what was happening prevailed, and he spoke first. "So all the same, why did you dive into the sea? Don't be afraid. I have bad habits." But judging a person in trouble is none of them. Liam looked at him oddly, as if judging. Then he sighed and said quietly, "Treasure." Noah thought that either he misheard or the grandfather decided to play a joke on him. But I could see from Liam's face that he was being serious. Then the guy began to fear that he was still too late with his help, and the man's brain was damaged as a result of drowning. However, maybe even before that, he was not too healthy mentally. Apparently realizing what they would think about him now, Liam decided to tell whether everything was as it was. Decided it couldn't get any worse. The story he told didn't sound particularly fantastic. From his father, the guy knew in his youth. Something similar happened all the time. As it turned out, being very young, Liam got into a very bad company, frankly, to the bandits. And so his friends decided to rob a jewelry store. He, to his shame, was going to this business with them. Changed my mind at the last moment. Either he was afraid or his conscience did not allow. But rather, both equally. As it turned out, he did the right thing, not only from a moral point of view. Quite quickly, the whole company was caught by law enforcement agencies. They weren't professional thieves. So punks for 18, 19 years have inherited, so it was not difficult to calculate them. But the stolen jewelry was not found with them, and was nowhere to be found. Like they've evaporated. None of the gang confessed where they hid them, but Liam knew literally the day before the arrest, saw them in the very place. Of course, they threw the loot into the river, hoping to find it later. But none of them was destined to return for treasure. They were judged regardless of age. To the fullest extent, they were sent to the camp. And who was shot while escaping? Who did not share something with their cellmates, and who died of tuberculosis. Until the end of the term, no one served. All died. This is such a sad but instructive story, Liam summed up. In all these years, I remembered where I was buried, but I did not touch other people's valuables. They will not lead to good. Just a few years ago, my granddaughter got sick. Still quite small. She would live, yes, live. And she has a heart defect. You can, of course, do the operation, but it is painfully expensive. We don't have that kind of money. My father abandoned my daughter to my granddaughter to my granddaughter. It seems even before it was revealed that she was pregnant. Maybe it's for the best. Melissa and I got on just fine without him. But about a year ago, she stayed with her granddaughter. One daughter went to the capital to earn money in order to get money for wolves, for an operation. Yes, it disappeared there. I tried, of course, to find her, only how to find a person in such a big city. And the police don't care. Just think some girl disappeared. They probably said she ran away from such a life and lives happily ever after somewhere in New York without a convoy, in the form of a small sick child and an old father. I know that Madison is not like that. Well, unless you prove it to them. So I still have one way to help out my granddaughter, and at the same time I can hire a private detective to look for my daughter. If the money remains, of course. There is a fortune at the bottom of the sea. That's what Liam seriously said. Whether to tie with these funerals to good, they definitely will not bring. If your granddaughter dies, there will certainly be no one to help you. And besides, it's not a fact yet that the jewels are there. Whether to tie with these funerals to good, they definitely will not bring. If your granddaughter dies, there will certainly be no one to help you. And besides, it's not a fact yet that the jewels are there. Whether to tie with these funerals to good, they definitely will not bring. If your granddaughter dies, there will certainly be no one to help you. And besides, it's not a fact yet that the jewels are there. Even if they really were thrown into the sea in this place, you never know what could have happened over the years. I have a couple of ideas. How can I get money? He walked Liam home, and he began to call him out of courtesy. He agreed to stop by for a few minutes, looked at the old man's granddaughter, a wonderful 5-year-old girl, kind, calm. Indeed, to live and live. And here is such grief. I became even more convinced that I needed to help this family. And he really had options where you can get money for it. However, the options are not particularly pleasant to him. In a small town, everyone knows each other. So Noah knew one crime boss, and he was aware that the guy was a high-class surgeon, repeatedly called him to his job. Come to me, I won't hurt you. How much do you get in your lousy hospital? It will be 10 times bigger than us. So to speak, an additional payment for the risk. No, answered Nick. I don't do such things, but as you know, you can figure it out. Find this man. Everyone just called him Steve, although that was hardly his real name. In the city, he kept an underground casino where he spent most of his time. And that's where Noah went the very next morning. The authorities, seeing him, beamed and almost embraced the surgeon. No way. He changed his mind. He chuckled. Money is never superfluous, but I really need the money. Calmly answered, either in debt for several months, but the amount is quite large. I can and will give it, not greedy. I won't even take interest. But how are you going to return them? Noah did. Telling Steve about a possible contribution was definitely not part of his plan. If the jewels really exist, the criminal is looking for them before a simple surgeon, and certainly will not consider information about the location of the treasure worthy of paying a debt. That's it, Steve chuckled. But look, I offer the following conditions. Until the day you repay the debt, you will work for me. Let's just say it's a guarantee that you can't do it all with my money. You don't deliver on time. Your contract, let's say, will be extended forever without the right to terminate it. Did you understand me well? Yes, it's not like a fool, Noah replied. Of course, such conditions were absolutely not to the liking of the young surgeon. But what can you do? The life of an innocent little girl is at stake. He still had a bright smile on the wall before his eyes, which, of course, knew about her illness, but did not even suspect how soon she could die. Perhaps, for the sake of this smile, one could shove his principles to hell. Moreover, he hoped that he would be able to get the treasured treasure from the bottom of the sea and pay off the bandit long before the designated period expired. Steve gave him 6 months. Maybe he wouldn't even have to deal with the aftermath of the criminal showdown. Of course, he did not dive into the sea himself. I hired a professional diver for this, the one to sweep the bottom up and down at a very decent radius from the place that Liam indicated. Unfortunately, no gems were found. Moreover, there are no traces of the fact that they were once there at all. In the meantime, a successful operation was performed on the walls in one of the best metropolitan clinics. The girl's life was no longer in danger. Now she was facing a long rehabilitation program, all in the same medical facility. Of course, such a small child could not be left alone, and therefore the grandfather was there with his granddaughter. This thought slightly tried on Noah with the fact that now he will have to work for Steve, apparently for the rest of his days, since it was not possible to obtain such a large amount for the time allotted to him. Of course, he tried not to show it, but he was sure that the criminal perfectly understood the true state of things. According to the contract, a couple of times a week he came to Steve's house. The latter each time warned the doctor in advance that his services might be needed on such and such a day and at such and such a time it should be. This was due to some kind of business that the gang went out on. Or he preferred not to know about it. As a rule, he just sat in a free room and could do some business of his own. He just couldn't go anywhere until Steve let him go. There hasn't been any work for him yet. Apparently, things were going pretty well with the criminals. But Noah did not know how long such luck would last. And one day, the moment came when he had to be seriously nervous. Several people burst into the apartment, swearing with such words that they had never heard before. He immediately realized that now he would have to start the work for which he was kept here on duty. His hands trembled in a way that had never happened before. He simply understood perfectly well that sewing up bandit wounds underground, in fact, was already complicity in a crime. But it was also clear to him that if he did something wrong, the consequences could be even worse than criminal prosecution. A hopeless situation, but you need to try to calm down. Noah succeeded. As soon as he saw the wound on the bandit's arm, leaving the jagged edges of the cut with the professional look of an experienced surgeon, he immediately realized that it was not a knife that had left her, much less a bullet. It was just a dog bite. Moreover, as it became clear from gangster conversations, received not even when trying to get into someone's private territory, just an accidental attack by a pack of stray dogs. Of course, not good either. No matter how you slice it, it's an underground operation for which, too, you can get into serious trouble. Still, it's not as bad as patching up frankly criminal wounds. But what hatched? The victim growled. Nick, come on, doctor. It will hurt, he warned honestly. Whether the anesthesia will cool down, we'll have to live. Yeah, no more painful than the dog bought. Cunning creatures. How did you get the stem? They immediately fled. They tell you, I bullet. Is there alcohol in the house? The surgeon asked. What do you want to roll for courage? Steve chuckled. The wound needs to be treated. It's just useless to live. It will rot even worse. Maybe even reach death. What did the victim not understand? You'll die shortly. Steve explained to him, taking out a bottle of cheap whiskey from the cupboard. Will it work? He asked Noah already. He just nodded. He took alcohol from his hands and splashed it on the wound. The bandit yelled, trying not to pay attention to him. The surgeon went to work. He gently retracted the edges of the wound and chewed them together, bandit in front of him or not. And you had to do your job in accordance with all the rules, not only out of fear of these people, but also out of professional decency. If you're willing to help, then help. This is what guided him all his life. It was for this reason that he chose the profession of a doctor and was not going to deviate from his principles even in such conditions. Over the next few minutes, he learned a few more strong expressions. Sometimes I even caught myself thinking that it would be nice to record such masterpieces purely for research purposes. Despite the confident look, the prisoner clearly did not like embroidery, wounds without anesthesia, and in expressing his feelings. He was not shy. That's not how Steve whispered at him. We don't need to draw too much attention to this apartment. Surprisingly, it worked flawlessly. Better than any anesthesia until the end of the operation, the bandit only hisses through his teeth, but did not utter a word or cry. Either he did not want to think about what would await this poor fellow. Otherwise, he put a clean bandage over the fresh suture and told him to change it at least once a day. This ended the first operation in his bandit career, and it wasn't nearly as bad as Noah had imagined. Not a cry. Either he did not want to think about what would await this poor fellow. Otherwise, he put a clean bandage over the fresh suture and told him to change it at least once a day. This ended the first operation in his bandit career, and it wasn't nearly as bad as Noah had imagined. Not a cry. Either he did not want to think about what would await this poor fellow. Otherwise, he put a clean bandage over the fresh suture and told him to change it at least once a day. This ended the first operation in his bandit career, and it wasn't nearly as bad as Noah had imagined. On the other hand, he was well aware that it would only get worse. Very soon, frankly, criminal wounds, stab wounds, gunshot wounds can go. He tried not to think about what his life would be like after the debt had expired. But it wasn't that easy. Terrible pictures climbed into my head, preventing me from sleeping normally at night. However, he did not see any way out of this situation. What are you going to do here? You can sell the car. He doesn't use it much anyway. You just can't learn much from her. Insufficient and prestigious, but not old enough to be considered an antique. Maybe part of the debt will be collected, but where else can you get the rest? He has only one apartment. Do not go homeless. Although the closer the reckoning period approached, the less terrible such an idea seemed. It's better to be honest for the homeless than to work for a bandit gang, and albeit indirectly, but still participate in their criminal activities. He is a doctor. He should help people, not these scumbags who rob and kill them. So a few more days passed. Calls from the bandit became more and more frequent, and whether it was not easy to combine them with their main work. And yet he still held on. One day, when he was just sitting at home, Steve had something that changed things dramatically. When he arrived, the landlord was reclining comfortably on the couch, staring at the big flat-screen TV. At first, I thought it was some kind of movie. This surprised him. Steve clearly did not give the impression of a connoisseur of cinema. Looking more closely, the surgeon realized that this was a recording from some kind of restaurant. Must be one of the criminal's legal establishments. Having lost all interest in the image, Weather already wanted to turn away. But then the camera changed angle, and he saw a small stage on which stood a woman in a premium and very revealing dress. She was very beautiful and sang well. Judging by the enthusiastic reaction of the hall, there was no sound. However, the attention of the guy was attracted not by the facts who this girl escaped from him against his will. "What did you like?" Steve grinned. "I can introduce you. Her voice is angelic. It's a pity you can't hear it. I would say it sings as good as it looks. You just have to travel far. She lives in the capital. This live stream is from my restaurant. I control the work from afar, so to speak. Progress, however." "Cool," Noah said absent-mindedly. "But who is this girl anyway? Where is she from?" "Yeah, I don't need to know." Steve was clearly getting annoyed. "I came to the restaurant to work as a dishwasher. The beggar is visible. True, she herself said that she remembers almost nothing about herself. Like they hit her on the head. Yes, they robbed it. Maybe so. In general, I don't care. The main thing worked well. Even Mirka was given to her right at the restaurant. Not to spend the night on the street. And as it turned out, they did not take it in vain. Some singer fell ill, and this lady volunteered to replace her. Turns out she sings really well, now a gem of a restaurant. Many come just to hear it. But for me, accordingly, the additional profit was such an increase for her. Noah looked at the girl in shock. He was drawn to her features, but not by their beauty, but by the fact that they were painful. Familiar to the young man, he recognized the nose and lips and eyebrows, and are especially clearly defined, as if carved by the hand of a skilled sculptor. Cheekbones. Liam had the same cheekbones. But everything else is like Naya, matured by 20 years. Could it be that this Melissa is the old man's missing daughter? After all, everything fits. She left for the capital to work, and if she was robbed there, and even beaten to the point of loss of memory, This explains why she disappeared. Well, her employer gave a direct answer to the question why the police didn't even want to take on this case. Steve, because everyone in the city knew and everyone was afraid of him, including law enforcement officers. Well, her employer gave a direct answer to the question why the police didn't even want to take on this case. Steve, because everyone in the city knew and everyone was afraid of him, including law enforcement officers. Well, her employer gave a direct answer to the question why the police didn't even want to take on this case. Steve, because everyone in the city knew and everyone was afraid of him, including law enforcement officers. If this is true, getting her out of this place will be oh so difficult. But you should at least try. Well, maybe not her at all. And he decided to start by talking to Liam. Fortunately, she and her granddaughter had just returned to their hometown. That same evening, either went to visit them. He was so excited that he did not even think that it would be worthwhile to call in advance and warn about the visit. But, of course, for the inhabitants of the house, it was completely unimportant. He rendered them such an invaluable service that they were glad to see him in this apartment at any time of the day or night. For a while, she and Liam talked about nothing. Either he was trying to figure out how best to start the conversation for which he had come here. I didn't want to give my grandfather false hope. Therefore, to begin with, he wanted to make sure that his guess was correct. Fortunately, he was helped by his grandfather himself, who spoke about his daughter Naya growing every day more and more like her mother. It seems that only her cheekbones are not our soft ones, too. Maybe it's childish, though. Shoot again. Or maybe not. Maybe this father. Maybe you have photos of Melissa, Noah asked carefully. How so? Liam asked. Of course have. Now it will go to the other end of the room. He began to actively look for something in the drawer, the room, and to his surprise, either he took out not some kind of album with photographs, but a smartphone. Old model, but very well preserved. It was clear that no one was using the phone much. Morosco just bought it for me, Grandpa explained. Only I didn't really get used to this thing. It's somehow more familiar to me, but I photographed it a little as well. Are you wondering what she looks like now? And then I still have albums with children's photographs and later already institute ones. Success, Noah also responded. Show, please, what she is now. Liam rummaged through his phone, opened one of the photos, and showed it to the young man. It was a close-up portrait, not very skillfully shot, but clearly with love for the girl depicted on it. For a moment, Noah was speechless. He did not believe until the last that the whole situation was not a mere coincidence or a game of his imagination. However, from the screen of the smartphone, the singer from Steve's restaurant in the capital was looking at him, smiling. Liam hoarsely, he said, slightly moving away from the shock. I think I know where your daughter is now. Here it was the grandfather's turn to lose the power of speech. His face showed how emotions change one another from surprise and disbelief to undisguised joy and back. He seemed to be unable to understand if his hearing was failing him. This imagination was not played, whether he is trying to wishful thinking. After all, isn't this just a cruel joke? Of course, Noah did not give the impression of a person who would joke about such things. Still, Liam knew too little of him to be sure of that. In the end, he was able to say quietly, "Where is she?" Noah, in as much detail as possible, told him about the recording he saw and about the girl on it, in which he immediately suspected Melissa and mentioned that if it was really her, it would be very difficult to get her out of that restaurant. Yes, and Liam himself, being a resident of this town and having an idea of who Steve was, understood this very well. Yes, he said in confusion. After all, my girl has always been able to, even went to a music school at one time. Then she got tired of this business, but she continued to sing for herself. He loves it very much. So everything fits. But how can we get it out? No matter how much he wanted to, or to help his grandfather go with him, he could not, because he was bound by work and an agreement with Steve. As a result, we agreed that Liam would go alone, but would be very careful and would contact the young man in any unforeseen situations. And while he himself followed the small wall, and so they did. Noah walked his grandfather to the train and wished him good luck. 2 days passed quietly. Liam called everyone twice a day. He found a restaurant, and the singer really turned out to be his daughter. But he hasn't been able to talk to her yet. By the time when the next one was to be called, grandfather did not get in touch. In the meantime, Noah was urgently summoned to his office by Steve. Judging by his tone, something out of the ordinary happened. The surgeon had never heard such annoyance in his voice before. With a heavy heart, he went to the apartment, which he silently called cursed. On the way, he kept wondering how much work awaits him and what he will have to face in general. To his surprise, when he arrived at the scene, he did not find a bunch of bandits bleeding from bullet wounds or some other terrible picture of those that he managed to draw for himself. Only Steve sitting in front of the TV and clearly out of sorts. As soon as he saw it, he grimaced. "Strange news reaches me from the capital of our motherland," he began pathetically. "They report that some old man managed to catch our one and only singer after work. What he said to her is unclear. Yes, only now the lady is actively torn to freedom. Do you know anything about this?" Noah was shocked and silent, not knowing what to answer in such a situation. He obviously didn't expect this. How not to frame Liam Melissa? How can you not sign their death warrant in your own words? The silence dragged on. Steve watched the young man's face intently, as if reading his thoughts. "Interestingly," he continued, and without waiting for an answer, "a certain surgeon who desperately dislikes my modest business not so long ago became interested in this young lady. Why did you think of hiring an old man to steal the girl you like from my restaurant?" "This is her father," he said quietly. "Whether she disappeared some time ago, went to work and did not return, and now I found it. And you, knowing who she works for, decided that you could just bring her home," mockingly asked Steve. "Or don't you know that they don't just leave me like that? Why did you give up on this girl? Is it really that hard to find a good singer, especially in the capital?" "A good singer, maybe not difficult, but a good singer who agrees to work for food and a bed at a restaurant is already somewhat more difficult. You know, don't you? I am a business person. Pitiful stories about lost daughters and no lost fathers are not very interesting to me. Tell me there's at least one reason for me to keep this old man alive." Noah looked at him, convulsively thinking what he could offer this man, and he himself understood that nothing. He owes him a lot of money anyway, and in case he did not give it back, he promised to work for him until the end of his life. So even this version of a possible offer from filed, plus 50 on the amount I owe you. Finally he ventured, "And what you have borrowed, you are not capable of giving back, is not it? And if you do not return before the end of the term, then what? Take the girl back, and this time not only as a singer. If you understand what I mean." Steve chuckled. "No," Noah blurted out too sharply. "If I don't give it back, you can kill me. And what good is it to me from killing a person who will be much more useful alive?" Noah sensed that the conversation was reaching a dead end. And then it dawned on him, even though he knew he would regret his words bitterly. A surgeon may be needed, as they say, in the field, right? We didn't have such an agreement. Steve looked at him even with some admiration. He clearly did not expect this turn of events. After thinking for a few minutes, he finally said, a well-defined amount, plus another half by the same date, or you will become a full-fledged member of my humble team. Don't you dare do anything to yourself. And then your girls in the top 10 will not be good. Home. Noah walked with a heavy heart, trying to understand how he got himself into this whole story and how to get out of it now. He didn't have any answers. On the way, he bought Naya a chocolate egg with a toy. The girl was very fond of such, but the opportunity to buy them for her grandfather fell quite rarely. Naya, as always, smiled carelessly, looking at Noah, who, it seems, had already begun to consider her lost father. Yes, and he himself experienced only the warmest feelings for this cheerful child. And now, watching her fascinated by the toy princess, carefully putting aside the chocolate, he was sure he had made the right decision, no matter what. Melissa and Liam returned the next day. Nia was very happy to finally see her mother. Grandpa also looked absolutely happy. Yes, and Noah himself is watching the family reunion. He let out a stingy male tear, and in the meantime, Grandfather quietly called him aside. "We have a strange story," he said, and began to tell. As it turned out, the man was not allowed into the restaurant, which, however, was quite expected. According to the dress code, he clearly did not go into this elite institution, and yet he managed to see his daughter out of the corner of his eye. Of course, this was enough to get to know her to spin around the establishment for some more time. Liam, it turned out that Melissa lives here in a closet, which is carefully guarded, but no one restricts the girl's movement, so she can safely go out, for example, to the store or for a walk, waiting for one of these exits. Liam approached his daughter to talk. Apparently, the mere sight of her father awakened in her memories of Michael as a result of the trauma. She remembered absolutely everything and who she was and what happened to her after her arrival in the capital. Melissa found herself a quite profitable job and calmly fulfilled her duties for several months. She lived modestly, putting aside almost her entire salary for her daughter's operation, and she managed to save up the necessary amount. She was about to go home. Yes, only someone obviously knew that she would go to the station with a bag full of money. Maybe they got a tip from work. Maybe something else. Only on the way she received a strong blow on the head. Behind her, she woke up without a bag and with very muddy memories of the past. Further, in principle, you yourself know about how you made your way to the restaurant first as a dishwasher and then as a singer. And now, remembering everything, she realized that she had to return home. I just decided to go to my closet for some things. In vain, of course. We had to run away with her. As soon as Melissa was in her modest dwelling in the castle, a key turned on the outside. Moreover, as the girl quickly became convinced, it was not at all the lock that she could open herself. Obviously, another hidden one was mounted in the door. At the same time, the restaurant guards grabbed Liam himself and also locked him in some room. Surprisingly, they treated him well. In his cell, there was a table and a bed, an easy chair. They even brought him food, but they didn't talk to him, didn't let him go out or see his daughter. But the most surprising, having kept probably about a day. They didn't just let us go. You don't know anything about it. It is known that I sighed or I made another deal with Steve. That's what I was afraid of. He shook his head. Liam, shouldn't you have gotten into such trouble because of us? But nothing. You have done so much for me that now it's my turn to help you. Liam did not give any additional explanations for these mysterious words. He only assured Noah that he would not do anything illegal or dangerous to himself or his family. This suited the young man quite well. Noah began to visit often for a happy reunion. In the family, he was friends with Liam and perceived Naya almost like his daughter. Her mother had nothing against this arrangement. After all, she already knew that this guy had saved them all. In fact, he sacrificed his life. But there was another reason forcing Noah to return to this hospitable house over and over again, namely, Melissa herself. Only a blind person would not notice how beautiful she is, and he, having heard her voice, fell in love. But besides that, the guy admired her willpower. It's not that simple. Having learned the terrible diagnosis of her only child, she did not give up and did not let go. She went to the capital and even managed to earn the necessary amount of money. Surely for this, She had to work for days without any rest, and what happened next definitely not her fault. And even finding herself in such monstrous circumstances, alone in a strange city without money and even memories, she was able to find a way out. The more Noah interacted with Melissa, the more he admired this beautiful woman. She was very smart, could keep up the conversation on any topic. But in addition, in communication with those whom she considered her own, she was gentle and kind. The guy seemed to have met just the perfect woman. He himself did not notice how he fell head over heels in love with her. And when I noticed for a while, I did not dare to do anything. He was tormented by doubts, but did he have the right to approach Melissa at all, given the circumstances? He is a bandit without 5 minutes. He owed a large amount of money to a serious crime boss. And if he does not give it back, then the relationship will obviously come to an end. He can risk himself, but not the woman he loves, her elderly father and young child. So is it worth giving Marusa hope? After all, if she responds to his feelings, happiness will be short-lived. And then it will be very difficult for her. Of course she will. She is strong. But why subject her to such a test? Perhaps he would not have dared to act if not for Liam. "I see. Do you like my Rebecca?" he remarked somehow. "How can you not like her?" "Well, why did you hesitate?" "That you're a good guy. I won't mind at all." "Yes, and Naya loves you. I'll tell you a secret, and my daughter cares about you. Is it in my position to impose my love on such a beautiful lady?" "Don't worry, you're about this debt," Liam replied. "I have one idea how to pay it. I don't mind. I see what you want. Only the debt is essentially not yours but ours, so it will be fair if we give it away." Having enlisted such a strange blessing from Melissa's father, Noah nevertheless decided to act. One day he put on his best suit and appeared on the threshold of the family's house with a huge bouquet of sunflowers. Unusual flowers for an unusual girl were opened to him by Liam. And, of course, I immediately guessed about the intentions of the guy to encourage, nodded to him. Noah went into the kitchen, where he was drinking tea to Melise at the table. Anna was really delighted with the bouquet she received and answered the guy's declaration of love that it was absolutely mutual. And so their relationship began. They began to go to cafes, cinemas, and just for walks together. Nia often joined them. And sometimes they went somewhere with the whole family. But the closer the time to pay the debt came, all the more gloomy and not talkative became either. It was evident that this situation was putting pressure on him, not allowing him to live normally, but even to breathe freely enough. Thoughts that all this happiness will soon end did not give the guy peace. Both Melissa and Liam understood this. One day, Liam invited Noah to take a walk with him. He looked extremely pleased, but did not want to explain anything. He only said to all questions, "Be patient a little. It's close here. Soon you will see everything yourself." They walked through the park. We went out to the main street of the city, but almost immediately turned into some kind of alley, which had a rather gloomy look. It was dirty dark in here. In a word, the place is extremely unpleasant. Very soon the garage complex seemed old and as unsightly as all its surroundings. On his territory and headed with a confident step, Liam. Still don't understand what they forgot in a place like this. Noah nonetheless followed him, no longer trying to ask any questions. Go to one of the garages. Grandpa rummaged through his pockets for a while and then pulled out the key. The lock opened easily, as if it had only recently been used. Going inside, Liam touched the ball with his hand, felt the switch along the wall, and somewhere under the ceiling, an old dim light bulb flared up. The contents of the garage were not very impressive. Some piles of rubbish in the corners and an old car in the middle. The car was obviously washed recently, and in general they tried to bring it in a more or less decent look. "You do not think that I brought you to this junk," Liam began to admire. "Now I will explain everything. This car has been standing for a long time, many years already. It belonged to my unfortunate friends, whom I have already told you about. Well, so did I. as a matter of fact. We were like brothers to each other. Everyone used the car, but they issued it to me only after that case with the jewelry. I was not attracted to the car, didn't want to like that. And there was no particular need. And she stood raised slowly. I didn't even want to go into that garage. When for the first time after so many years he began to open. Imagine the lock just fell out. I had to change. It's a miracle no one has been here before. Apparently they did not think that there is something to take here, but it's not about that. In general, I thought, how would we deal with your debt? And then I remembered the machine, and many collectors were interested in antiques after all, and my hand did not rise to sell, even though I didn't use it. And I don't think I could get a lot of money for it, but at least something. And so he began to prepare for sale. Washed there, some parts changed, examined, and here the most interesting thing happened. It's good that I decided to tighten up instead of selling it as it is. Thought for a car in fair condition. Maybe they'll pay more than for the floor of a collapsed one. Thought for a car in fair condition. Maybe they'll pay more than for the floor of a collapsed one. Thought for a car in fair condition. Maybe they'll pay more than for the floor of a collapsed one. And that Liam came to the back of the car, beckoning an interested Noah to follow him with the gesture of a magician. He opened the trunk. Inside was a black garbage bag, torn somewhere in the middle, and inside were gold chains and rings with precious stone. Watches, back streets, bracelets, earrings. A fortune. The guy gasped in surprise. Considering all this wealth of our fleet, Liam chuckled. Just not where I was looking for it. Looks like my friends realized that they would soon be captured, and they decided to hide the treasures like this in order to throw everyone off the trail. They pretended to be thrown into the river. In general, now we have enough money, and your debt will still be paid off. Only it is necessary to act according to the law thoughtfully, said Noah. How much is 25 of the cost? It's still a lot. I think enough. Of course, nodding Liama. Proceeds turned out to be much more than what was needed to settle with the bandit. Noah took only the part that was needed to return the debt. He left everything else with Liam and his family, although the latter offered to divide everything equal. Immediately after receiving the money, Noah went straight to Steve's house. He was impatient to settle accounts with the criminal once and for all, interrupting any possible connection between them, opening the door and seeing the surgeon's broad smile. The bandit immediately turned gloomy. No doubt he understood perfectly well what that meant. However, he let Noah into the apartment and behaved as usual. Which he got out of, he said calmly. After reading the money, who has an agreement? But still think about it. Maybe you will come to me voluntarily. Yes, and along with the habit. You know you don't. Noah waved him off. High moral principles and stuff was nobility, Steve chuckled. But that's where the ordinary surgeon has such huge money. Something I cannot believe that they were obtained honestly. Or will you tell me what the treasure found? You wouldn't believe it, Noah chuckled. That ended the conversation. Even though Steve was a bandit, he could hardly be blamed for non-compliance with the agreements. Now Noah could be absolutely sure that nothing from this side threatens either him or those people, and was always ready to help. But until recent events, there was definitely no one he could truly trust. And now they appeared and gave him those feelings of warmth and tenderness which he missed throughout his life. Now, he finally knew what it was like to be expected at home. After paying off the debt, there was one more important thing left that he could not have done before. Despite all his desire, he had a pretty decent amount of money left. He's been saving them from every paycheck since he owed a bandit. Of course, this would not be close enough to pay. But it was impossible to do absolutely nothing. Now, however, he had a purpose for which to spend those savings. He's been saving them from every paycheck since he owed a bandit. Of course, this would not be close enough to pay, but it was impossible to do absolutely nothing. Now, however, he had a purpose for which to spend those savings. He's been saving them from every paycheck since he owed a bandit. Of course, this would not be close enough to pay, but it was impossible to do absolutely nothing. Now, however, he had a purpose for which to spend those savings. Without thinking twice, he went to the nearest jewelry store and chose a small, elegant white gold ring. Then I called one of the best restaurants in the city and booked a table for 2 there. The matter remained small. Liam gladly agreed to sit with his granddaughter while the young ones go on a date. But he proposed to arrange a common holiday the next day in honor of finding the treasure and the release of Noah from work for a gang of criminals. Of course, this idea was met with stormy approval from all family members, especially the little one on the wall. She didn't understand everything, of course, but she perfectly caught how the mood of the adults around her had changed. "I can finally take you to a decent place," joyfully said Noah on the way to the restaurant. "With you, any place becomes quite decent." Melissa smiled. "I'm not sure, though, that the setting of this respectable place won't bring back unpleasant memories for me. So don't be offended if I want to go somewhere less pretentious." "Fine. Of course I understand, but I don't think you should worry about it." And indeed, the restaurant was not at all like the place in which Melissa unwittingly had to work for several months. By its appearance, it was even difficult to say that it is one of the best establishments in the city. Minimalism prevailed in the interior, but in some incomprehensible way, the atmosphere at the same time was very cozy, as if even at home. And the food was delicious. Noah knew and loved this place since his first marriage. Trying to please his wife, he sometimes, when funds allowed, tried to take her to expensive establishments. True, the girl did not appreciate his efforts to smithereens, criticizing the decoration of the hall. Explain what a stylish design is. And there is a feature of truly elite establishments. Did not work out. From her point of view, the restaurant should have been yelling right from the doorstep that something luxurious is waiting for you here, immersed in gold and expensive decor elements, and all in this spirit. Moreover, gold and jewelry could well have been sham, but look rich. But I really like this place myself. And he was sure Melissa would be in solidarity with him on this issue. These two have a lot in common. Sometimes it seemed to them that they had known each other all their lives. Never before has any of them been so easy and comfortable with another person. "It's very nice here," Melissa approved right from the door. I too like it," Noah smiled back. They proceeded to a small table near the window, which had a wonderful view of the garden. Settled in and placed in order. The guy asked the waiter to bring another bottle of champagne with a couple of glasses, and when Melissa bought her drink, she almost crushed them with a ring. Not so long ago, bought either in a jewelry store. It was very successful that the newly made groom was a doctor and was able to make sure that everything was in order with his beloved. Within a few minutes, she was bursting with merry laughter, looking at him with a mixture of delight and bewilderment. "What melodrama did you see this in?" "I have no idea," he said honestly. "Probably I really saw it somewhere in the cinema, but for a long time. Now this idea just came to my mind and seemed quite successful. In principle, she is really quite good," Melissa smiled. "And yes, of course, I will marry you." The wedding was scheduled a few months later in the same restaurant. There were not too many guests, but the company was warm. The celebration was remembered for a long time by everyone who attended it as one of the best holidays where he managed to visit. Everyone was especially touched by Naya, who could not understand why moms and dads get married. After all, they should already be married. With the money that was left from the treasure, the family unanimously decided to improve living conditions. As a result, immediately after the wedding, the newlyweds, together with their daughter and father, moved to live in a private house. Their choice fell on a modest but neat plot in the private sector, located in a neighboring town. None of them wanted to stay at home, After everything that happened here, the memories of this whole treasure affair were unpleasant. In addition, it was disturbing to realize that they continued to live very close to a major crime boss. Together, we decided that this is not the best place to raise children. The decision was also influenced by the fact that an experienced doctor was urgently needed in a hospital in a neighboring town, as head of the surgical department. It so happened that the previous person who held this position left to seek his fortune in the capital, and from the rest of the staff, none of them had enough qualifications. Talia was accepted there with great pleasure. Of course, his salary is now somewhat higher than before. With great enthusiasm, he set about reforms in his department, broke through refresher courses for his subordinates, and in his spare time, he himself was engaged in their training. As a result, the department became the best in the hospital, according not only to management but also to patients. Successes were either noted at the highest level, and after only a few years, he received the position of chief physician. Now he had the opportunity to make positive changes in the work of the entire hospital as a whole, which he was incredibly happy about. Of course, Melissa supported her husband in every possible way and rejoiced at his success. As for Leon, Noah's longtime rival, law enforcement agencies soon became aware of his drug fraud. Patients are dissatisfied with the quality of service. A class action lawsuit was filed against the hospital by an unscrupulous manager, managed to get off with only a suspended sentence. But now in any hospital they would take him only as a janitor. Yes, and that's not a fact. Of course, this could not but affect the income of his family. Realizing what had happened, his wife immediately left him. I wanted to go back to Noah. Upon learning that he has now become a big boss with a very good salary. But here, of course, she was in for a big disappointment. Only I always knew that you would go far. In Kavala, by appearing directly at the hospital department, I just got mad at you then. So she left. Almost immediately regretted it. It was just too late. Now it's not too late. It's cold, he inquired. For your information, I have a wife and a child, and I'm certainly not going to leave them for you. It's a pity, she said, instantly turning into a businesslike tone. Well, I wish you luck. Call if your wife gets bored. Noah didn't doubt for a second that this woman wouldn't stay long and would probably be able to hook up some other rich man very soon. These will never disappear, and so it happened. I found myself some kind of metropolitan businessman. He learned about this from the invitation to the wedding. Of course, he didn't go there. I have no doubt that it was sent only to tell him what woman he missed. What about Steve? His criminal career also could not last long. In Noah's hometown, the chief of police was replaced, and if the previous one was bought by a criminal gang with giblets, then this young and principled one turned out to be too tough even for this criminal. He was not taken by incorruptible threats, not blackmail. First of all, he purged the ranks of the police, not only firing but also putting on trial those of them who condone urban crime. And then it was the turn of Steve himself and his gang. These guys are guilty of a lot of serious crimes. They received really large sentences and are unlikely to ever be released. And whether from Melissa, the growing daughters and Liam live quietly in their house, where happiness, peace, and mutual understanding reign. Over the years, the relationship of the spouses has not cooled, but seems to have become filled with even greater passion. They still go on dates, talk heart to heart, and give each other small but nice gifts. Naya considers Noah her own father, and he treats her the same way. And whether from Melissa, the growing daughters and Liam live quietly in their house, where happiness, peace, and mutual understanding reign. Over the years, the relationship of the spouses has not cooled, but seems to have become filled with even greater passion. They still go on dates, talk heart to heart, and give each other small but nice gifts. Naya considers Noah her own father, and he treats her the same way. And whether from Melissa, the growing daughters and Liam live quietly in their house, where happiness, peace, and mutual understanding reign. Over the years, the relationship of the spouses has not cooled, but seems to have become filled with even greater passion. They still go on dates, talk heart to heart, and give each other small but nice gifts. Naya considers Noah her own father, and he treats her the same way. But so far, none of them suspect that soon there will be a little more of them. If you like the story, I hope for your support with a thumbs up button for you. Just one click. But for me, it is extremely important. Thank you. Bye and bye.